live now.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Friday, March 22nd, and this is the Senate Government Operations Committee. And we are just doing a very short agenda, considering two reappointments to the Cannabis Control Board. And we are first, I think we'll start with introducing those of us who are here. So you know who you're talking to, both of you know who you're talking to. And then we'll just turn it over to you, James, and you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've been on the board for a while, so chairing the board, talking about the work of the board and your sort of vision for the next steps. So I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I represent the Addison District.
I'm Olivia Parker, Committee Assistant.
This is Senator Tanya Vihovsky, who represents Chittenden Central District. She's next door in appropriations, so she'll be and I'll be leaving, and then she'll chair while I'm gone. That is Senator Rebecca White, who represents the Windsor District. She's not feeling well today. And then up on the screen.
Hi, Senator Bob Norris, Franklin County and Elbert in the county of Grand Isle.
And Watson, Washington District. Good to see you.
Allison Larson, Windsor County District.
Awesome. So that's us. You wanna turn it over to
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for doing this. I know legislative time is a very finite resource. My name is James Pepper. I am the chair of the Cannabis Control Board. I was appointed first in April of 2021. It's a 3-year term, and we just got the kind of paperwork from the governor that did appoint all 3 board members. And this is the advice and consent process.
Yeah.
So I thought, just because I don't generally get to update this committee on how things are going with the cannabis market, I might just do a little bit of that and talk about some of the challenges that we have ahead.
That sounds great.
I will be very brief on this, just to give you a progress report. There are the first thing that we did when we were SAB was sit down with some of the lead sponsors of Act 164, our enabling legislation, and just try to distill what the what the expectations were for this market and what the general themes were. There was no legislative intent really, so it's kind of piece together what was important to the sponsors. First and foremost was to focus on small local farmers. Second was try to shift the legacy market, the kind of existing market, into a regulated space. A lot of states just try and stamp it out, just arrest their way out of it and replace it with kind of large corporations. That was not the intent of our bill. Also to support individuals and communities that have been historically disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. And then also just, always to generate sufficient revenue to cover our regulatory mandate, but also to make strategic investments in substance misuse prevention, education, and after school. So how well are we doing? We have an uncapped licensing system. So, other states, sometimes they just say, we're going to license 50 cultivators this year, and we'll maybe reconsider that next year. That's not the case here.
Okay. Are you done over there?
Yes.
Okay.
You could join me eating.
Can you just stay in here? I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Otherwise, we won't have quorum. Just come back. You can leave. Thank you.
I'm just giving a brief progress report on how the market's shaking out. We've issued 405 cultivation licenses. 76% of those are for tier 1 small cultivators, which is defined in statute as 1,000 square feet of growing capacity or less. So this to me represents a very significant market capture of the former illicit market, people that were growing kind of their spare bedroom, their cellars, or garages, or whatever. Approximately 60% of our cultivators are outdoor cultivators, which is an incredible benefit to some of our energy and environmental goals in the city. We have 77 product manufacturers, 2 testing labs, and 75 retail establishments. In the first 16 months of the market, we've generated just shy of 130 million in taxable sales. That equates to 18 million in excise tax collected. and 7.8 million in sales tax. Again, the excise tax, 30% of that goes towards substance misuse prevention. And then the entirety of the sales tax goes to after-school programs.
Madam Vice Chair, ask a question. So how many towns of our 252 towns have opted in?
Good question. I think it's right around 80. I don't have the exact number. I know that it changed at town meeting day. We added a few, but I think it's right around 80 that have opted in. So
Right. And how many licenses are pending? How many additional retail spaces might we be expecting?
yeah, I think we have 12 that are in the like
In the works?
applications in the
So we have
application.
75 now, but.
Yeah, so I think we'll be, and again, we don't have a cap on retail licenses. That is one of the challenges that I was gonna present as when, when we get there.
Right.
Just this opt-in, opt-out provision has led towards a very unnatural distribution of cannabis retail establishments. The classic example is Burlington has 12 and one more in the pipeline. And South Burlington has 0, and Williston has 0. And it's just a mere function of, it's not that people in Williston or South Burlington don't consume cannabis.
We should partner with the 251 Club.
Yeah.
Then everybody, then go around, get stamped and.
Yeah, and it's my opinion. I mean, I don't have the kind of economic background to back this up, but I just don't think that 12 or 13 stores are gonna be able to survive like Burlington in the long run. And so that is a challenge that we're facing, and we were granted some additional authority. Well, it's independent piece of legislation you guys should be seeing probably next week. That will give us, the cannabis board, some additional authority over the siting of retail establishments that allows us to take into consideration things like population density and the needs of the market. So kind of try and avoid these areas of retail density and try and have a more equitable distribution of retail establishments. It'd be great to have that coupled with a flipping of the presumption of opt-in, opt-out. So towns are presumptively in until they're out, until they vote to be out. But I know that was a major sticking point between the House and the Senate in the negotiation of the original.
It was a battle, it could be revisited.
Yeah. Some of the challenges that we're facing, on the adult use side, there's just a lack of access to traditional banking, insurance, federal tax write-offs, and technical business and support. Meaning that what is already, it's already tough to run a small business. You have all of these challenges added on to that if you're working with cannabis. And then, of course, cannabis companies don't have any access to financing, lines of credit, or federal bankruptcy protection. So when a cannabis business fails, it's a lot more personally devastating to the owners than a traditional small business. And this is compounded for our social equity licenses, who by definition have been on the losing end of the war on drugs and other kind of systemic issues. And their kind of reward for being a social equity applicant is they get to participate in this highly precarious market that's vulnerable to things like flooding and theft and right. Another challenge is we're reaching a kind of point where the amount of canopy that we've licensed in total is kind of where the demand is. And so every time we add new licenses, it has an impact on the price of cannabis that has a detriment to the existing licensees. We're in the middle of a post-harvest supply shock, oversupply currently. We know that this is going to be an annual occurrence. It's predicted in all of our economic modeling, but given our preference for outdoor cultivation, it's particularly hard for those licenses in particular.
That's awesome.
So Pepper, forgive my ignorance, but I fast amounts of ignorance on this subject. When these buds are harvested, when the harvest is in, I know we have a flood on the market, but isn't that product good for a long time?
It is, and we've been trying to encourage strategies or just education with our cultivators about how to preserve their cannabis for longer, either converting it into a distillate that is shelf stable or kind of cryo freezing it, freezing it immediately, flash freezing it in ways so that they can weather this supply shock. Because honestly,
Yeah, it was a big thing. You've mentioned it before.
right. I mean, I think what we don't know quite yet, this is still very early in the market, is what our supply is going to look like pre-harvest, later this year and August and September, when all of that kind of outdoor flower has moved its way through the market to one degree or another, and we still have a consistent demand. So, there was a discussion of moratorium on new license types in the House, and I think it's premature to be having that conversation.
Great.
Another just challenge ahead is that the medical use program, as it was conceived almost nearly 15 years ago, really at an inflection point. It hasn't been updated since, and the model just doesn't seem to be working when you prop up in an adult use market right alongside of it. So another piece of the legislation that's moving to the Senate, hopefully next week, is kind of a beginning of a reimagining of the medical use program. The legislation also gives us some more dynamic levers over the supply chain. It allows us to kind of, what we've done is we've closed out all but our smallest tiers of cultivation. So moving forward, any new entrant to the market will have to start small. They'll have to start at either a tier 1 or a tier 2, which are really kind of micro licenses compared to any other state. But then this, the kind of legislation contemplates giving us the authority to allow people that meet certain performance benchmarks to graduate to tiers that are otherwise closed to new entrants. So it allows for expansion, allows people that are successful to graduate. It also gives us the authority for people that are, not using all of their canopy to move down to a tier that's more reflective of what they're actually doing, based upon the kind of prior year benchmarks. And I think that's important because, what we're seeing now, it's not nefarious necessarily, but we're seeing people just get licensed at huge, at our highest tiers when they were open. And they're using maybe a quarter of what they're able to. And that, has a chilling effect on everyone else because they're, everyone is they have to operate under the assumption that one day this person will use all of their canopy. And the impacts that would have on the price of cannabis, the wholesale price of cannabis. So essentially, these two provisions gives us the ability to kind of have a more accurate reflection of what the market is and what the supply chain is, and allows us to kind of keep open small licenses, but can focus on craft and not have a moratorium on new license types, but kind of allow successful people to grow. And that is my market update and some of the challenges ahead. I'm happy to answer any questions at all about anything. I know this is a very busy time of year, so you guys probably are happy to just move on.
Senator Norris.
Thank you. Pepper, in reference to, I don't know if you can comment on this, but House Bill H612, as far as removing the caps, but more importantly, from what I'm hearing from local people here, it's the removing the farm buildings, exempting farm buildings used by licensed and outdoor cannabis cultivations from a public building. What effect will that have on the market, you think?
Yeah, so what, I'll answer the second part first. There was in an early draft, I should say, there was a removal of potency caps on flower and solid concentrates. That got taken out, so that's no longer in the bill. But on the building, essentially what's going on is, we're supposed to encourage participation by small local farmers. That's right in the bill. So a lot of people are, growing on a small part of the plot of their farm, and they're sole proprietors essentially. They don't have employees. They're just growing kind of 1,000 square feet of cannabis on an existing farm. So they're issued a non-jurisdictional letter from the Division of Fire Safety saying that this is not a public building, so we don't have authority over you. So you don't have to bring your barn up to kind of the commercial building codes. And what has been happening is that these small farmers, need to bring in what are called mobile trim teams around harvest time. So for about a week out of the year, they're bringing on a crew of maybe 3 or 4 people to chop down their harvest and bring it into a barn structure. And, that triggers fire safety's jurisdiction because you're bringing on an employee to your property. And so then the question is, do they need to bring that barn up to the full spectrum of the commercial building codes? And so what the H612 says is that no, if you're a small outdoor cultivator that's on an existing farm and you're just bringing on an employee for 1 or 2 weeks out of the year, just for this limited purpose, that this farm building will not be considered a public building for the purpose of applying the commercial building codes. And I think it's an important piece, small farmers. And it's always important to remember that if this person were growing hemp, which is considered an agricultural product, and doing the exact same thing, then they would not have to, the farm building would be a farm building, wouldn't be a public building, because they're exempt from the commercial building code.
So it's sort of leveling the playing field.
Right, yeah, and it's a very it's a very narrow provision, but I think it's one that really does serve the kind of needs of kind of a diversified farm. It's doing multiple things, including cannabis.
So we're here to convert. So it's great to have all that update, but we need to know about you
Okay.
and how you're enjoying the job. What are your biggest challenges, which we've heard a couple of them. And how are you enjoying it? Where do you want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, we're building a lab currently. We're one of the first, we were authorized, I think, first out of all the states to build a reference lab. We're just kind of no fault of anyone's really, with flooding and everything else, haven't been able to start building again. But that's going to be trying to incorporate that lab into our regulatory mission is going to be really important. That's a major challenge. We have a new executive director we need to hire as well.
When is that RFP going out, or when is that?
The application
job
window
description
is
going?
closed now, so she's joining. Brandon's coming here in May, and we'll.
Oh, what's the name of your?
No,
Oh, really?
Brandon's coming here in May, and our hope is to have the person in place before she leaves.
That would be nice.
Yeah. And then, we just constantly need to be thinking strategically about how to support these small operators that exist in this very precarious world of cannabis. I think we're always looking at strategies as to how we can do things like having mobile flash freeze units that could maybe go around and help cultivators around harvest time, so that they can weather the supply shock. They don't have to worry about selling all of their cannabis at a time when the market's flooded. Obviously helping our social equity businesses with the technical assistance and support that would be available to them if they were just considered regular farmers and not, the forced farm viability program, the UVM extension, all those things would be available to them if it just wasn't cannabis. They're growing tomatoes instead of cannabis. Obviously, we have to navigate whatever happens federally too. There's a lot of talk about safe banking. There's a lot of talk about rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. All of those things have impacts on our kind of day-to-day operations. And
other than the challenges, how are your small cultivators doing? Are they making enough money to survive? I mean, how is the health of the revenue of most of your cultivators?
Well, I think it's good. We've had a number of people relinquish their licenses already. Just for a variety of reasons. We do exit interviews with people and, try and ascertain why they're relinquishing. And a lot of it really is just regulatory cost. Some of it is, people got in because they needed an extra, $20,000 to pave their driveway or something like that. And, it was for a limited purpose. There was always their intent to kind of get in and get out. But, I think that they're doing well. The revenue numbers are exceeding what our initial projections were, JFO's initial projections were. And again, 76% of our cultivators are tier 1. So if our numbers are better than what we expected, then it's to the benefit of those kind of small cultivators, or it's because of them. So, there's a lot of positive signs. And, You know, I think that we have a really great team at the cannabis board. We have a really great board, very cohesive. We all kind of share the same goals, which is important. And, you know, I think, our initial phase, of course, was to build the ship, build the plane.
Yeah.
And then get people in the door. And now we really are kind of at a transition where it's kind of keeping people in compliance with the regulations, helping them understand why it's important not to use certain pesticides, why that they may have been using on the illicit market. Why kind of, you know, some of our regulations are in place, testing and packaging. So the whole kind of dynamic is shifting a little bit.
But to go back to the first things, are you enjoying yourself? Is it
Yes.
still
Oh,
continuing
yes.
to be
Yeah.
fun for you and
Yes,
challenging?
yes, I mean,
Stimulating?
intellectually, this is a Celtic knot. I mean, everything is just so complicated. And, you know, yeah, not through any fault of the Department of Health, but
I know.
they will not come in and certify commercial kitchens for cannabis operators because they have drug-free workplace requirements that are federal. And so, you know, we have to kind of be masters of, you know, agriculture won't step foot on a cannabis farm because, again, federal implications. So we have to be masters of cultivation, product manufacturing, retail, security, you know, it's banking, you know, DFR has been an excellent partner with us in kind of reviewing insurance policies and making sure that they're not usurious or, you know, illusory, you know, they've been, yeah, I mean, every day it's kind of like, well, what new is going to happen today? What thing that doesn't have an answer are we going to find today? And we just, you know, Bryn's been so helpful and so great at just not getting hung up on the things she can't control and just, you know, giving her best effort for the things that we can.
Yeah, this is an amusing name, isn't it? The Cannabis Control Board, when
Oh,
you have
yes.
so little control over so much.
Right. Very true.
I'm sorry, I missed much of what you were talking about, but I'll review the video.
Yeah, please send your testimony
Sure.
to us.
Yeah,
Who hadn't gotten it
if
yet.
you've written something up, and also your CV or
Yes.
bio or whatever you feel comfortable sharing with us. My question, and I say this because I'm gonna ask Julie the same thing, but we have even just yesterday had a bill on the floor about another substance, tobacco and nicotine. And often we get the question, you may have heard some of these questions on the floor, I don't know. But we often get the question about sort of, shouldn't everything we're doing be exactly the same, you know, nicotine and cigarettes and cannabis and alcohol, and, you know, all three substances have the same rules, the same sort of regulatory complex. And I'm wondering, and I am especially, I serve on the Health and Welfare Committee, as you might know, and we take certainly the sort of health implications of all three of these substances into consideration. So I'm wondering how you think of the health implications, the regulatory structure as it compares to the three substances, and then the impact on youth, and how you all approach that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's so many layers to it. I mean, you know, you talk about kind of an even playing field. You know, I thought immediately just jumped to the kind of 92% vape tax, which had the impact of essentially banning cannabis vapes as an effective ban in the cannabis market. And while I think I can certainly understand the strategy on tobacco, this is one area where if you ban the cannabis vape, people are just going to go to the illicit market for it. There's a vibrant illicit market that exists in Vermont for all these things. And so, you know, what we saw for about a 9-month period in, you know, leading up to the pandemic was the EVALI crisis, the electronic vaping associated lung injury crisis. And the CDC did kind of a postmortem, like what happened? Why were all these people dying? Well, why are all these hospitalizations happening? And they found that it was their conclusion that the vast majority of what was driving it was illicit market cannabis vapes, that people were putting vitamin E acetate into to dilute them. And so, you know, it's a weird sort of policy, it's a harm reductions policy to say, well, we can't tax cannabis vapes at 92% and essentially just push people to the illicit market for those. But when it comes to the mistakes that have been made over the years around advertising and marketing to children, and I mean, what Joe Camel was the number one most recognizable cartoon for a long period of time. Like, we have the ability to not go down that path of cannabis. I think it's really important that we maintain some of the course on ensuring that we're not marketing to youth, not trying to encourage consumption. You know, it's a challenge, of course, because a lot of advertising, whatever else, is subjective, and you know, reasonable minds disagree about what's appealing to youth, what's not. So we're taking an extremely cautious approach, and I know that the industry does not like it, and there's also First Amendment implications. But I do think that, you know, if wherever we can learn about some of the failures of tobacco, even pharmaceuticals and others, trying to apply them to a brand new market, you know, we're all better for it.
Mhm. And how do you think if maybe you already asked this question, I don't know, if the feds do change and take cannabis off I'm getting the blank from,
Control substance act.
yeah, how will that impact what you, as the Vermont Cannabis Control Board do?
Yeah, it's funny because if they descheduled it altogether, it would potentially wipe out everything that we've built so far. It's a very fragile market right now, and essentially all of the demand for cannabis in Vermont could easily be supplied by like 3 or 4 mega farms in Massachusetts or New York. And so if all of a sudden interstate commerce was permitted, because it's now considered the same legality of a tomato or whatever else, then all of the small businesses that are kind of very struggling right now to kind of build brands, all of that kind of gets wiped out, I feel like. But that's not what they're considering. They're considering moving from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Schedule 1 has things like heroin and LSD on it. Schedule 3 has things like Tylenol, codeine, like more traditional kind of and that will have a very narrow impact, very important impact. It will mean that cannabis, like sales of cannabis, are no longer it'll allow people to write off on their federal tax returns their business costs, which is an incredibly important thing. It'll probably increase some research opportunities for cannabis infused products, like medical products.
But it wouldn't change the single state market that we have right now? No, okay. Senator Eagleski.
Now, I recognize that you are not an economist, and so you may not be able to answer my question, but there's plenty of things that we do interstate commerce in alcohol. For example, beer is what's really coming to mind. Vermont has a strong space for local craft product. And so I wonder if you think there's any insulating factor in sort of the tradition of Vermont really kind of being engaged in its local craft product, insulating against that, what you're describing a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we're doing right now is we're trying to build into the DNA of our market its resilience against interstate commerce. That 76% tier 1 cultivators, that kind of diversity of cultivation, you don't see it in any other state. It just doesn't exist. That is something that will give us a competitive advantage against those kind of 5 mega farms, the hypothetical 5 mega farms in Massachusetts that are growing kind of generic, kind of like Walmart version of cannabis. And that's also why I strongly don't think a moratorium is a good idea right now, because while a lot of people got in and a lot of people are, having a tough time weathering the supply shock, that competition, especially at the smaller level, is what's driving quality and driving innovation and kind of really, helping to build brands in Vermont. So, a lot of what we do is trying to set the kind of ground conditions at the outset for eventual legalization. Because we have 26 states now have legal cannabis markets, and 40 plus have medical markets. There's going to come a tipping point. The vast majority of Americans live in states that have legal cannabis. Just there's not quite enough, there's not 60 votes in the, federal Congress or Senate.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and just wanted, it's helpful to get a sense of kind of like where it's going, given that I share your belief that legalization, federal legalization is coming.
Yeah.
Senator Norris, did you have any? I want to make sure.
Yes.
Oh, you already asked. Okay. I just wanted to make sure you were ignored.
Yes.
I would never ignore Bob.
Okay, awesome. Senator Clarkson, do you have a question?
So just to finish up on the personal side of this, which is you're continuing to be stimulated by it, different problem solving all the time. I take it you'd like to be confirmed for another 3 years?
Yes, please, if that's.
Okay, that's what, that's what we're here for.
Okay, yes, yeah.
You gave us a great update on how the Cannabis Control Board is doing and what some of the challenges are. We haven't so much gotten to the nut of the matter, which is, does he want the job again?
I would assume so, otherwise you wouldn't have come over.
Right. You never know, you never know.
And you're in the process of hiring a new.
Executive director.
Yes,
And we made it so it doesn't have to be a lawyer.
right.
Yeah.
And I would, if you have the time, just Bryn is an amazing person. She
We're
really
about to
is.
spend a lot of time with her.
Yeah, and I feel very fortunate for all the time that she spent focused on our issue. But as a Vermonter, I'm very happy that she's coming back to this institution and helping guide your work here.
Yeah, we're excited that it was a relief to hear that we had somebody of such good quality because Jen did a great job too. And it's great that we'll have both of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There would be no cannabis market without Bryn. I like,
Right.
and it's not an exaggeration at all. I mean, she saw the challenge. She knew that kind of making a equitable and sustainable market was a good use of her time. And she got us back on schedule. There was a 4-month delay in appointing us because of the pandemic, which had the effect that we missed the legislative session where we were supposed to establish the market structure and get funds to, set up our licensing portal and everything else. So she had to kind of, everything that was supposed to take 2 years got condensed down to 1 year. She somehow got us back on track.
That's great. All right, are there any other questions for James? Awesome. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming in.
Yeah,
We really
thank you all.
appreciate it.
And thank you,
Sure.
for Senator Norris.
All right, awesome. Julie, you want to come on and join us?
And Pepper, would you be kind of make sure you send that
I will.
earlier testimony to
Absolutely, in my CV too.
And your
I
CV.
just didn't know either. Forgot to.
Maybe a little dusting off, right?
Well, welcome. Thank you. You sort of got the benefit of hearing the conversation beforehand, but if you want to introduce yourself for the record and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be reappointed, assuming you do, and sort of what your vision for the next phase of the board is.
Sure. So Julie Hulbert, currently Cannabis Control Board, and yes, I would like to continue to be on the Cannabis Control Board if you all, that is your will. I'll share a little bit about my background then, and I'll frame it. I laugh a little because I was at a high school in Vermont earlier this week talking about the myriad of ways that you can get to your end results in your career. And I kept the word of the week is circuitous, right? Like you do not have a straight path from one point to the next. I went to Vermont State University Johnson with the intention of becoming a teacher and came out with a hospitality degree. So, and I have not only am I an alumni of that school, but I've gone back and I'm currently a student there in their master's of leadership programs. I'll finish that this year as well. After I finished my undergrad, I worked for a .com, which was a very fast paced, just like cannabis, regulatory changing all the time, market changing all the time. And we didn't have defined roles in that .com when .coms were new. So I fell into the HR role because most of my degree was around people management, resource management, and organizational management. So then I did HR for 20 years, mostly in municipal government. 12 years of that was in municipal government in two of Vermont's busiest cities, Burlington and Winooski. And then in 2017, as in my HR role, I was appointed by the Vermont Human Resources Association to the first ever Ethics Commission, which is how I have sat before you all
which is
before.
how I first met
This is how I first met you. Yes, absolutely. And I was chair of that commission from 2019 to 2021 until I joined the Cannabis Control Board. Locally in my town, I'm very active. I was on the Parks and Rec Commission at one point. I was on the Select Board at one point. Now I kind of do ad hoc organization so that our legislators can talk with their constituents more often. So for 3 years, we have not had an event that was really enjoyed by our community, and the folks who were doing it before weren't going to bring it back. So I gathered a group of people to bring it back, and it was a legislative town hall on town meeting day eve. The only complaint we got was that we didn't have spaghetti this time, so next year we will have spaghetti.
Oh, food.
So there was not
Food
food,
is
there was
so-
not enough time to find the food. Next year we'll do the food, and more people will, actually, we had quite a few people come for it being the first time in 3 years, and Senator Mazza was able to be there, which is wonderful, so. That's how I'm engaged in my local community as well. So, on the cannabis board, most of my time has been spent in sort of two policy areas. One is the social equity and the other is public health. So I appreciate your question about, how do we regulate different substances across different groups. That has been really, really engaging and meaningful work on both sides. So when we first started, we had an advisory committee, which we broke down into subcommittees. And the two subcommittees that I sort of shepherded through their process was the social equity and the public health. And the social equity was a big one because they came up with the recommendations for the criteria for social equity application. So it was impactful and meaningful. And they came up with the recommendations to the board for the fee structure, the reduced fee structure for social equity applicants. So it's really, really meaningful for folks who are coming from the legacy market, who've been impacted by cannabis prohibition, to be able to come into this market and be able to build a business for themselves. So it's incredibly impactful work. On the public health side, I helped to develop the label, which is, maybe a little less interesting than the social equity side, but still important. And the standardized symbol and the flyer that's in every retail store that talks about, what it is to use cannabis and provides the warnings. And then I spend a lot of time with the prevention community. So when we have bills before the legislature, often we hear from our prevention community about what will this mean and what does this mean for public health. And I spend a lot of time talking to those folks, explaining exactly what the goals of the board are.
So it sounds like, and I didn't hear everything that James said, but it sounds like the three of you kind of divvy up different areas, and yours social equity and
Yeah,
public health.
yeah.
Okay, or do you have a specific one, or do you just big picture everything?
I was in charge of, I think the market structure subcommittee, and I've been dealing a lot with banking and insurance issues.
Okay.
Kyle does a lot of the energy and environment.
Okay.
Well, that's good.
Open meeting laws, we can't talk to each other.
Right.
Without calling a meeting.
Yeah, that's pesky.
But we have use of our backgrounds in that way, right?
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good.
It's a little challenging. Sorry, I think that's the part of the open meeting law. It's a whole burdensome.
It's hard for 3-member boards.
Really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We hear you.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna exempt you from it.
Well, I don't know. Someday maybe.
Speak for yourself, Senator.
There's always
Right
more.
there.
What?
You don't expand the board.
You could, and then we have to pay them more.
Okay, let's not go down this rabbit hole. So how about that question of the three different substances and their regulatory structure, and how do we maintain consistency and not be hypocritical about the way we regulate the three substances, particularly when it comes to youth and
Yes.
and
The flavors. We've just gone through this flavor battle.
Yes, my initial thought is they are three separate substances with different impacts on the human body, right? Not all of which we fully understand. So there's that, and that will, the more we understand about cannabis or tobacco or alcohol, the more the evolution there will be of how we regulate them and the public health impact. But I would agree with my colleague on the advertising. I am from the Joe Camel generation. We traded those dollars at school. That was probably not a great idea. And And I'm a parent of 2 teenagers, so I'm seeing firsthand what it looks like to, raise kids who are in a world where there is cannabis, but there's also flavors and how easy it is for them to obtain, online, and how many things come from being online. So in terms of, I would agree, like I'm saying, with Pepper, that anything we can do to restrict the advertising or direct the advertising away from children and say, this is for adults who are making adult choices, it's not for children. We can destigmatize it for adults without normalizing it for children.
And what about the flavors and the gummies and all the things that seem to be more kid oriented?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what you're talking about with flavors. So for some people, depending, and in the cannabis realm, it depends on why they're using cannabis. So there are folks in the medical program who might be using cannabis who are terminally ill, and they're using it to relieve symptoms. And flavor is the only way that they can use it. That probably should be protected. But, I think the legislature has to consider, as you do, the public health impact of what it means for those flavors, what it means, what you're putting in those substances to make them flavored. There's a lot that we don't know about how those flavors and those chemicals interact with being heated quickly to a certain temperature. We know that some things are safe to be eaten, but we know that they're not necessarily safe once they're heated up. There's a different chemical reaction there. So again, it has to be considered. Science always has to be considered.
Yeah, and until it's legalized federally, the science is
The
limited.
science is going to be behind, yes.
It's really in fact that catch-22.
Yeah.
And just the banking, we touched on banking before you got here. We have one credit union now, or do all credit unions have accounts for our cannabis retailers?
4 or 5,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Or-
just state chartered credit unions, and there are national banks that are willing to take the risk. I mean, the advice of the National Bank Association is don't touch cannabis money, but there are certain banks that are willing to take the risk that are operating in the state.
Correct. So we do have 5 credit unions that are working with our cannabis
Yeah.
businesses.
Yes.
It is expensive for them, though. They have to pay really high fees to bank. They pay higher fees
Yeah.
than other businesses, which is, in terms of the social equity and the technical support that we're looking to do. Most folks have chosen to do either marketing or bookkeeping, because the bookkeeping for a cannabis business is much more complicated than it is for any other regulated industry.
Interesting. Are there any other questions, Richard?
Oh,
Senator Norris, do you have a question? No? Okay. Senator Clarkson?
so you enjoyed it? You want to do it again?
Yes, please.
Good. What I failed to remember is, do we have term limits?
Yes,
2 or 3?
we're allowed to serve 3 terms.
Up to 9
And
years.
it's a 3-year term, except the inaugural was staggered, so there'd never be 3 vacancies at a time.
So we have 2 vacancies here at the same time.
So Kyle was a 1-year term,
Right.
Julie was a 2-year term, and I was a 3-year term, our inaugural terms. And they just got the paperwork to you.
So you're being renewed for 3 years, you're being renewed for 3 years.
Yes, but going back a year, right? So my appointment was actually up in February of last year.
Why didn't we see you then?
I don't know. I kept coming and you kept paying me, so I just kept doing my work.
Yeah, we never got your paperwork here.
Yeah.
And then Kyle will be next year.
Yes,
He
his,
came in here thinking he was supposed to come with you, but I don't think he's up for reappointment until next year.
yes, like Pepper was saying, he was only appointed for 1 year and he was reappointed, and then the next time he's up is 2025.
He should have been confirmed last biennium.
But
It sounds like Julie was
But I
supposed to do this too.
I think it's just in the governor's office paperwork issue.
yeah, that's not, there are paperwork glitches with some appointments, so. And we actually have, last year in my other committee, we went to interview people who had been appointed, and one of them had died since they were appointed, and the governor's office didn't even know. So there were, sometimes there are those kinds of things. So thankfully, that's not the case.
We're all here.
You. Well, I thank you for coming, and talking to us. I'm trying to think of other questions about the Cannabis Control Board. We obviously, the GovOps committee, we got your appointments, but we don't actually do the bills related to cannabis. They go to our Economic Development and General Affairs Committee, where Senator Clarkson is in the morning.
Unless it's a restructuring or.
Unless it's like a governmental restructuring, if we were to give you 2 more board members, that would probably come through us, but, now that you're an established market, we just treat it like every other business market, that's where they go.
Deliciously normal.
Yeah,
And who might you be?
Oh, I'm Fallon. I'm interning with the office this semester. I'm a law student at Vermont Law Graduate School.
Cool, right?
Sweet.
What year are you?
I'm a 2L.
sweet.
Good to have you aboard.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Long tradition, BLS. Internships and clerkships here.
Yeah. So we have, another appointment that we're considering also, so we'll probably do you all as a group. So if you don't hear about it for a while, don't get worried. It's not because there's an issue, it's just we're sort of waiting to get all of our ducks in a row on all the appointments first. And then because you're all sort of at a level that requires it, there'll be a floor report where I'm pretty sure for the Cannabis Control Board, there is for like the Green Mountain Care Board and the Board of Education.
There was the last time.
Yeah,
Oh, was it?
I think so. At the very least, there would be for the chair, but I think
Yeah,
there is
I
for all
thought it
three
was
of them.
just the chair.
But,
Secretaries.
yeah, so we'll see, but whoever reports your, appointment on the board might reach out with more questions just to fill in some of the details, but, thank you for being with us today, both of you, I
Thank
really
you for having
appreciate it.
us.
Thank you for your work establishing our cannabis market in Vermont.
Yeah, really. The heavy lifting has been on your shoulders,
Yeah,
so
Vermontizing it.
really
which
grateful.
is a silly verb, but, it's really important that it be what our state wants, and I think that you guys have done a really good job with that, so thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's impressive. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
It's amazing what you've accomplished in such a short time.
Yeah. And if there's anything that we can do as GovOps committee, but, or more broadly as the legislature, I know, there are a couple bills in play, but if there are other things, please let us know.
Yes, we're getting on it.
Yes, hopefully next week. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for giving Bryn back.
Well, we haven't given her back yet.
Soon.
And so you're hoping to get this new executive director on, and
Our,
help.
yeah,
To close,
on
Monday,
Monday, yeah, our
and so we
application
have-
will
yeah.
close Monday, so we have, I think, about 30 candidates that have applied.
Oh, that's pretty good
Yeah.
in this job market. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
they don't know how complex it is, so. Maybe they do, I guess.
Well, good luck. I hope you get someone good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Even if they aren't gonna be a lawyer necessarily.